Today I'm going to show you how to make your own original machine in the style of Studio Ghibli. And of course, we're going to be making it out of trash. Let's go! I want my mech to be inspired by the machines of Laputa and Nausicaa and less so Howl's Moving Castle. Besides, I don't want this to be a blatant ripoff of Studson, just a tasteful one. To make a machine look like it's out of a Ghibli movie, it's going to need a lot of round curves, overlapping metal plates, and interesting articulation. So let's get started. To start, you're going to need to hoard a mountain of trash that you hide all throughout your house in the hopes that you might one day make something out of it. Sift through your trash and see if anything inspires you. I usually like to go in with a plan, but this time I'm just letting the trash guide me. I have been waiting years to use this piece. My best guess is that it's the crow's nest of a Playmobil set, but when you flip it over, it's got a great ship shape. But rule number one of Ghibli is round, so I'm going to crack an egg on top of this thing. Next, I picked up this questionably clean pipe off the ground. Please don't tell me what this is used for. I used it to make up the bulk of this ship body. I just need to Dremel away all the pipe decals. To blend these two areas together, I attached this half of a Christmas tree ornament. Editor's note, at the time of recording, I didn't realize how sus this looked. That's better. Just remember to sand down any pieces of plastic you use when building like this.
Sand down.
Nice, it's looking pretty clean, but to make it look even cleaner, we're gonna need to borrow something from the bathroom. This lid is an excellent shape, but it's looking a little wimpy, so I replaced it with Big Lid. I cut out the bit I needed to complete the butt curve, but this butt needs something else. This bit from a squirt bottle will be perfect. I glued that squirt bottle piece in place, and then I topped it with the top of that shampoo bottle lid. And now it's starting to look like a ship. Thank God. Instead of trying to find the perfect piece of junk, I just rounded out the shape with some cardboard and some EVA foam. Remember when I said I wasn't going to make this look like Howl's Moving Castle? Well, I lied. I want to give this thing a face, and being from Nova Scotia, I was really tempted to give it a Theodore Tugboat face. But I think a Howl's Moving Castle face is a reference a few more people will get. This face is looking hungry. I think I'll give it a snack. Or maybe I'll just use the plastic from this yogurt container to complete the mouth shape. In case it was unclear, this video is kind of a love letter to Daddy Studson.
You're no son of mine.
If you've fallen under Studson's spell, you've probably thought about making something like this, or you've started crafting, or you made your own YouTube channel inspired by him. I wanted to pay tribute to one of my favorite creators while also filling the void while we all wait for his next video. Alright, back to the build. We're gonna need another egg. This egg will help round out that booty shape. Now to continue with the theme of round, we need to round out the top of this ship. I racked my brain on how I was going to do this, while finally settling on this genius level move. I cut out this segment of a light bulb cage, and I used that to create the bones of the ship. This is weirdly close to how actual ships are made. I finished off the back with a bisected plastic dome. With those bones in place, I glued in yogurt plastic as overlapping metal plates. I wanted this to pay homage to the ohms from Nausicaa. Next, you're going to need to find someone who has trouble breathing and steal their medicine to use for crafting. When cutting plastic like this, it's important to mask up so you don't damage your perfectly healthy lungs. I'm going to use these inhalers to form the foundations of my turret towers, capping them off with a shaving cream lid. Finally, topping them with a bisected egg dome, and then attaching those turrets to the side. Now jumping to a completely unrelated section, to make that bottom pipe look more like metal plates, I scored it with a hobby knife. I used the painter's tape here as a guide. With that, the shape of the body is looking good, so it's time to greeble. I took the time to organize my trash into bits I might want to use, but I ended up digging through the bag over and over again throughout this project. We're going to glue in a faceplate made of more recycled plastic. And I found this ancient piece of technology that I'm not quite sure what it does because I'm far too young, but it made for great Canon windows. So I glued it in place to hold those iconic Ghibli Canon eyes. The Canons were made out of these definitely still good dry erase markers. So the egg dome at the top has these holes in it. Instead of filling these holes, I thought it would be cool to drill more holes to be those exhausts? I don't know how ships work. This did look cool, but I didn't measure, so yeah, I messed it up. I spent way too long fixing this mistake, and as a reminder of this painful process, there's a little piece of plastic rattling around inside the machine. Now it's time to turn to the current turret cannons, which are made up of some definitely not Lego attached to a moisturizer tube mounted inside a little wheel. I dremeled out a space for the cannon to fit, didn't mean to do that, and glued it in place. I glued in some tires as a reference to tugboats, but these don't make it into the final build, so just ignore them for now. When scratch building, you can't be afraid to just try stuff. Hesitation can lead to procrastinating and not finishing your projects. So try stuff out, you can always get rid of it later. This keyboard key has some nice curves, but F's in the chat if you don't like it. I attached this little pipe from a lighter on top as a little exhaust pipe. If you live in a place with a ton of smokers, you can get a bunch of great greebles from all of the lighters people leave lying on the ground. And speaking of things found on the ground, I found this piece of plastic that has a perfect Ghibli dome shape. What a find. This metal bit is from a dollar store steamroller that I destroyed to make another robot project that I never finished. If you want to see me make a Metabots video, comment down below. I imagine this folds down to create a staircase that people can enter through. This is the first actual bit for this build. It's a 40K or something, but it makes for a great exhaust pipe. I don't have the tools to drill out metal, so I instead attached a piece of pump bottle tube to make it look like an actual pipe. I then attached it in place with some hot glue, and then strengthened the bond with some super glue. At this stage I wasn't sure if I wanted 2 legs or 4, so I asked my friends, and they unanimously said 4, so 4 it is. From the beginning of this build, I knew I wanted it to have articulated legs like the Lapida robots. So when I found this bit at the dollar store, I was pretty excited. Also, this fidget toy is Studson approved. This fidget toy as legs was pretty much good to go, but I needed to make some feet. So up until this point, this build has been more of a ship than a robot. Ships make sense to me. I've made a ship before, but the mechanics of a robot are a whole different thing. I think I spent an entire day just trying to make these feet. And they're fine. I used some not Lego pieces to make the toes, and some other bits like more keyboard pieces to make the heels. With some extra greebles implying some articulation and some mechanical parts, they turned out okay, but it took me an embarrassingly long time to make them. I attached the feet to the legs, and then I had a thought. This build is pretty light. It might be able to have articulated legs, and if that's the case, it would be completely posable. So I did a little hot glue placement test to see if it would work, and oh my god. Man. I was so excited. Not only will this thing be really fun to pose, it's also going to be really fun to play with. That brings me to why I made this mech. Adepticon is just around the corner, and there's going to be a giant tournament of Mech 28. Mech 28 is an awesome game about fighting robots made by my friend Bill. I met Bill at Adepticon last year and he is absolutely the best, and I really wanted to take part in the big Mech 28 tournament this year. So I made this build for that. The advantage, and maybe cheat, of having a posable model is that I can duck down, I can get up, I can stand in more precarious positions, so I can have a much more dynamic gameplay. I'm super excited to see how this plays, but because it's posable, you're probably going to see the bottom of its feet sometimes, so I covered those with some EVA foam. With that, the feet are looking good, but the legs are looking a little too much like a dollar store toy that I've done nothing to. So to imply a bit more industrial mechanical parts, I needed a bunch of circles. So I cut out some circles using a hole punch and some scrap plastic. This took forever and hurt my hand. And speaking of hurt hands, as I was working on this project, I used so much super glue and got so much on my fingers. When you peel it peels off a little bit of your skin, and by the time I was done this project, all of my fingertips were completely raw. Anyways, once the circles were cut out, I glued them in place. The effect is subtle, but I think it was necessary. But with that, the legs are done and ready to be glued in. The back legs needed to come out a bit, so to imply a bit more articulation, I glued in some buttons and those tires from earlier. Getting to use all of these bits and all of this junk really puts a smile on my face. But as I got close to finishing the build, I got a bit sloppy and... This bit would have been a lot easier to film if I didn't use all of my dry erase markers making cannons. We are almost done greebling. I just need to blend the arms into the body with some armor pieces. The front guards are made with a bisected highlighter. This was certainly a highlight of this build. Not really, but what were these bits from a lighter that fit perfectly over top of the legs. Best bit of the build by far. And with that, the greebling is done and it's time to rivet. I was going to do a smooth transition revealing the riveted robot, but I realized that the rhinestones that I bought from the dollar store were too big for this project. I could certainly buy smaller rhinestones, but a much worse and much more time-consuming method is to cut all the rivets yourself out of armature wire. I'm just going to tell myself that the uneven cuts are actually charming. And with that, here's that smooth transition. Non-riveted? Riveted. Riveting content, I know. But what big craft YouTube doesn't want to tell you is that gluing rivets is annoying and they can fall off, which sucks. I had to re-glue a bunch of rivets and try a bunch of different gluing techniques, but I do think it was worth it overall. But some of those questionable gluing methods left residue all over the model, so to smooth out those areas and to help hold the rivets in place, I did a layer of Mod Podge over the whole thing. I colored the Mod Podge brown because I'm a special little snowflake, and I thought if any showed up underneath, I would rather it look like rust than just black. Once the Mod Podge was dry, it was time to paint. I primed the whole thing first with a zenithal highlight. I didn't really know where to start, so I went into any cracks or any areas I thought might be rusty, and I painted those areas brown. Sometimes when I'm painting, I swap between brushes to use different paint colors, and sometimes I put the extra brush in my mouth. This is a bad habit. It's a bad habit because if there's paint on the brush, then this might happen. So yeah, don't put your brush in your mouth.
Don't you put it in your mouth. Don't you put it in your mouth.
I wanted my metals to look like Ghibli metals, so I mixed my metallic paint with different colored contrast paints. I used varying amounts to give a lot of variety with the different metal plates, and I switched between a copper paint and a silver paint where I thought it would look good. Once I liked where the paint was, I went back over top with different shades of blue, green, purple, and pink. The great thing about having a posable robot is that it's really easy to paint all of the different parts. The bad thing about having a posable robot is the paint on the legs chipped. I didn't bother sanding the fidget toy, which was probably a mistake, and I didn't really prime it properly, which was also a mistake. This might be my fault. So I went back in with a watered down primer hoping to get some better paint adhesion, but to make sure it wouldn't be super noticeable if the paint chipped, I painted the legs with lots of oranges and greens, and stop putting brushes in your mouth! I repeated the same washing process until I was happy with it, and then I went in with a bright silver dry brush over all of the rivets and some of the edge details. And finally, to break up the metallic bits, I went in with a bright orange rusty color. And with that, the painting is done, and it's time for the beauty shots. As always, let me know what you want to see me make next time. If you want to see me make more videos like this, consider joining me on Patreon. Joining at the lowest tier helps me afford the materials to make crazy things like this. Also, I have a giveaway going on right now, so if you want a chance to win this horrible, beautiful, erotic creation, head on over to my Patreon. Adepticon is days away at this point, and I still have to paint my warband, so I'm gonna go do that, and I'll see you after I get back. Bye!